We're going to do a roll call for attendance.
Mrs. Hogan?
Present.
Mr. Foos?
Here.
Mrs. McWhorter?
Here.
Mr. Brophy?
Here.
Mrs. Gannon?
Here.
Ms. Diro?
Here.
Mr. Hemingway? Ms. Nyman? Mr. Updegrove? Here.
We need to approve the minutes from November 19th, 2019. Approved. Second. Melody. Ms. McWhorter, excuse me.
Any comments?
Any comments? No. Thank you. Any opposed? No. Okay. All in favor? Okay. Next is the public comment period.
I got it. No one. No one.
Okay. There is no incentive for public comment. Next, we're going to have a presentation of the comprehensive plan.
So I'd like to welcome everybody to tonight. This is a rescheduled comprehensive plan meeting from the month of January. It is also Ms. Tilly's birthday, so I think, I don't know if you intentionally planned it, so your first official meeting would be on your birthday, but what better way, what better way to celebrate your birthday than talk about the comprehensive plan. But what I do feel a little bit remiss about is the fact that we were unable to have a specific conversation about the comprehensive plan before it was submitted to the state. I believe at least 3 times, maybe 4 times, I gave you access to the draft and offered the opportunity for any questions. It is a very overwhelming document. The final submission happened last Friday because it was due on the 31st, and the end product of it ended up being 123 pages long, if I'm not mistaken. So it was a very lengthy document. We can take some credit to a good portion of the document, but understand that embedded within the comprehensive plan is the special ed plan, which is I believe, a 3-year document that it needs to be submitted to the state as well. So we were blessed with the special ed team and the work that they had done early in the year to help develop the comprehensive plan piece. So if you took the opportunity to go through it, you definitely see different elements of the plan. My goal tonight is to really talk to you about the comprehensive plan, but to show you more specifics about what our work towards a profile of a graduate is going to be, as well as give you a little bit of an overview of the Future Ready Index, and show you some resources that we've created on our website to help support the Boyertown area community to see how the good work we're doing here and effective work we're doing here to meet the needs of our students. So I'm excited. I know there's been a lot of controversial topics on the board's agenda, but what I'm excited about is to really talk about our students tonight and really have some conversation about how effective our instructional practices are. So I think the presentation is not super long, so I feel like if you have a specific question along the way, please stop me. That way we don't have to wait till the very end to get to the questions, and certainly I can answer whatever I can, and Dr. Obero is my right-hand woman over there, and we've worked very carefully and diligently on the work that's happening. So one of the things we want to work towards, and this is from Dr. Bedden coming on board last year. This is an area where it's a really great opportunity for us to really think about what do we want our students in the Boyertown Area School District to look like from the time they enter kindergarten till the time they graduate the Boyertown area senior high school. What kinds of opportunities, what kinds of characteristics, what kinds of chances do we want to give our students to create that true profile of a graduate? So I'm not the kind of person to read from the presentation, so I'm going to just summarize. So if there's any, again, specific questions along the way, please yell. But what we have done, and with the help of Allison Moyer, we have created a web page. I have the going to take everybody back. So when you're on the Boyertown homepage, if you go to our district and you go to Profile of a Graduate, that's where you find this. So I want to make sure you have access to be able to see where it is, and the stakeholders that you communicate with, this is an opportunity for them to see this resource. The comprehensive draft plan is here as well, so you can click on that and it automatically downloads the draft. When we get the finalized version of the draft, hopefully from the state that it's approved, we will put that up here. But the Profile of a Graduate page gives us information about our Profile of a Graduate. And like I stated before, it gives you the characteristics that we would be looking at for our students and what are our expectations that we have as our students graduate our senior high school. So there's a little bit of an overview. If you, I always say wheel down because I'm using my mouse, but if you wheel down on the page, you can see the work that we did last summer, which was really a precursor to our comprehensive plan work. Our poster right behind Dr. Bedden is our vision, mission, goals work. So that language that was so critical in helping to guide our decisions moving forward with our district is a key component. So that is on this page. If you remember, Mr. Wales and the video that was given for an overview of our comprehensive plan, of our vision statement, mission statement, the video is here, so there's a link to that. And also the board approval for our vision, mission, goals, which I believe was last maybe September, is also here as well. So if you wheel down even further, it goes to talk about our comprehensive planning process and how we look at the individual components of our comprehensive plan. The draft was available through January 27th. I mean, technically it's still posted on the website, but again, it gives another link here to download the comprehensive plan, which, you know, the whole public has access to. From the legal standpoint, the draft of the comprehensive plan needed to be posted for 28 days. So right before the winter break, December 15th, I'm thinking it might have been, we posted it. So technically, all the way up through the third week of January was our 28th day. So we met the compliance to make sure that it was posted for public view for 28 days. And then once it was posted for 28 days, Dr. Bedden and Mr. Foose, as the board president, had to sign that the comprehensive plan was, you know, kind of agreed upon from the district perspective, and then we clicked submit last Friday. So it was submitted to the state. One of the elements that is a key component to our data collection for our district is the Future Ready Index. And all part of this profile and looking at the data behind our students and behind our district, the Future Ready Index is a collection of data points for the state that allows outside entities from the school perspective to really look at data for our schools. I'm going to click on the Future Ready Index. The link is here, but I already have it open here. So if you click on the Future Ready Index, what it does, it gives you the opportunity to really look at any school throughout the state of Pennsylvania. So I'm just going to type in Boyertown. And I'm just clicking Boyertown. I could click on a specific school, but I'm not, because Boyertown will come up with all of the 10 schools, all of the 10 schools that our district has. So what you can do is, I believe you can take up to 7 schools and you can do comparative statistics for each of the schools. You can do it individually, you can do it as a group of 7, or you know, you can kind of click and find the data that you want to find. So I'm just going to take my old building, Colebrook Elementary School, and I'll give you some more specifics about the Future Ready Index and what it provides to the community. But the 3 key components are the state assessment measures, the on-track measures, and also college and career measures. So if I tell you in a nutshell what this looks like, state assessment measures are how students do on a particular assessment on a particular day. So it's the score. On-track measures is really thinking about, and we think of that as achievement. On-track measures are what we think about when we think about how kids grow. So not only does the state look at how our students score on a particular assessment, a particular component of an assessment, but now they look at how our students grow over time, which I think is a really nice component that the state has added, because not all of our students score really high on our assessments, but they grow from year to year. So they take that into consideration when you look at our students. And finally, another big piece that has been a huge element that has been a movement over the past 2 to 3 years within the state of Pennsylvania is college and career measures, which I'll explain in a little bit. So as we looked at our comprehensive plan, we talked about One Boyertown. We talked about our mission and our vision, the work that took place last summer. Our comprehensive planning document is a requirement from PDE every 3 years. It's a focus on data-driven and research-based district and school planning. We were just talking about the Future Ready Index. This is truly hot off the press. It's only really the second year in existence, and they've already made some dynamic changes within the Ready Index. It kicked off in November of 2018. So if you think about it, we were just in November of 2019, so it's truly in its second year of existence. And like I termed before, it has a dashboard that really talks about academic performance, student progress, and also college and career readiness. The state assessment measures that it talks about are benchmarks or goals for all, and it also talks about goals for growth for individuals. So if you look, it shows proficient advanced students, how many students achieve proficient or advanced on state assessments. It talks about percentage of advanced. It also talks about subgroups, and I really want you to remember the subgroup category because you will see shortly when I give you some data from our schools what the subgroup component the kind of impact that has on the progress for some of our schools. It prioritizes grade 3 for reading. Research shows that students should be as proficient as they possibly can by the third grade to predict success for students, and it also uses the same calculations for grade 7 in mathematics. They really feel like by the time you reach grade 7, you should be proficient in your mathematical components at that particular time. Again, an overview of the Future Ready Index. This was in one of your weekly updates. For those of you that have been on the board since last year, this is very similar information with minor tweaks from what it was from last year. Drilling down a little bit more, the indicators, the state assessment measures, it looks at PSSA, Keystone proficiency, the annual growth for our students, also the percentage of advanced in on PSSAs and Keystones. The on track, it looks at attendance, it looks at English language proficiency, and like I shared before, grade 3 and grade 7 mathematics. And this is the growing, most impactful right now area that schools are looking at, is really looking at the college and career measures, which entails the graduation rates, career standard benchmarks, the industry-based learning, percentage of advanced on industry competency tests, the rigorous course of study, and post-secondary transition to school, military, or work. They are not saying like just 5 years ago that it's just okay that we look at where our kids are now, but really thinking about how are we planning for the future of our students and the success once they leave the Boyertown Area School District. And jump ahead here a little bit. Why is the Future Ready PA Index valuable to educators in the community? It really recognizes the students and it serves them, and it really has given more of a broader overview of our students, that they're not just standardized test scores, that it really brings in those 3 elements that we've been talking about. It allows educators in the community, school boards, to determine successes and identify areas of improvement in their schools and programs, and I'll show you that shortly. And it also, believe it or not, and I am saying something positive about the state system, it is an easy to navigate ability for you to really look at data from our schools. Going to show you about a 2-minute video on our Future Ready.
Pennsylvanians have been looking for a more comprehensive way to evaluate school progress and student success in the classroom and beyond. Using feedback gathered over 3 years and at the direction of Governor Tom Wolf, the Department of Education created the Future Ready PA Index. The Future Ready PA Index is a holistic tool that provides communities with a one-stop location for comprehensive information and data on student and school success. FutureReadyPA.org features a dashboard that highlights how schools are making progress across multiple categories rather than solely on standardized test scores. Finding information on your school is simple. You can also filter, compare, and find information on multiple schools, track school progress towards state goals, and view annual improvement data. A color-coded system illustrates student and school progress measured annually via a collection of indicators. These indicators fall into three main categories. Statewide assessment indicators measure student performance on standardized tests, such as the PSSAs and the Keystone exams. On-track indicators measure attendance and progress in reading and math. Lastly, college and career-ready indicators illustrate how well students are being prepared for post-secondary success. Explore futurereadypa.org and find the information you've been looking for and more.
So as we look at our data from our Future Ready Index, one thing we want to highlight right off the bat are some of our accomplishments from the Boyertown Area School District. I need to kind of reiterate the state in releasing this information is not always in a timely manner. So our students take our assessments when they do, but we don't necessarily get direct feedback from the Future Ready Index until much later in time. In fact, the Future Ready Index from last year's data from the 18-19 school year was not released until November. So it's kind of an antiquated way to really make decisions based upon how you can change or modify instructional practices at that particular time. But what is nice about it is that you can see trends over time to see what kinds of supports, what kinds of implementation of programming have you done to really help support kids. So that being said, you can look up on the board and we have a lot of achievement data highlights, which, as I stated before, think of achievement as how students did on a particular test assessment on that particular day. It's not necessarily how they grew, but it's how they performed on a specific test. And there's super exciting things here. Like the first one right off the bat, in elementary, all student groups meet or exceed the standard statewide average in all areas. So right off the bat, all of our student groups, which remember I talked about subgroups, which I'll explain that in a couple minutes, all of our student groups met or exceeded the statewide averages. You can look at some of the other highlights a little bit halfway down. Secondary, all student groups meet or exceed interim goal improvement targets, which are at the statewide average. All secondary schools exceed the statewide average in scoring in the advanced range with respect to some of our achievement scores. So again, a lot of highlights on here which are super exciting. Growth data, like I shared with you, it's how a particular student might do from one year to the other. So this is equally as important because not all of our students score super high on tests, but how do they grow between year to year? The ultimate goal is to have our students create or have 1 year's worth of growth, instructional growth during the course of a year. Many of our students grow more than a year during the course of one calendar year. So again, this is some super exciting information up here. First one, middle schools meet or exceed the growth goals in the areas of ELA literature and math algebra 1, super exciting. All student groups at BASH exceeded the statewide growth average in science. Another highlight, elementary, all student groups meet or exceed the growth standard in science. Again, science, very huge highlight for us. And finally, in most elementaries, all student groups meet or exceed growth standards in math and ELA. So again, more excitement.
So it's most elementary schools.
Mm-hmm.
All right, because it wasn't making sense. Most elementary all student groups. So
It's the all student group. Right, so if we look at the all student group and not a subgroup, so if you take all of the students in an elementary school and categorize them as one group, it's the all student group.
Right.
If you look at a subgroup like the special education population, that would be considered in a subgroup. So when you look at a subgroup, which again, I'll get in the weeds a little bit here, the subgroup, because X amount of students in a particular subgroup are there, it creates a subgroup. So then they get scored individually, and that's where I'm going to show you shortly how the high school has a couple areas that they're going to focus on for future improvement. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
The wording of it's a little...
Yeah, it's most elementary, you're talking about individual elementary schools.
Right, yep. So we like to look at not we like to call our areas of improvement as our areas of opportunity for growth. So how are we going to grow our students in particular areas? So if you look at our achievement data on the left-hand side and our growth data on the right-hand side, our team of individuals that came together to really look at the data points for the comprehensive plan determined that these are focal areas for our schools to work on. And I'll let you look at that. Couple highlights: career standard benchmark for subgroups at the secondary level. That's a critical one, and I'm going to show you a little bit about how we are automatically and putting things in place right off the bat to really help support that, because last year was the first time that we had to collect a portfolio for our students for career measures, and the state put it in place after the start of our school year. So districts were kind of scrounging together to figure out how are they collecting this data. So some of our students that are at BCTC, for instance, did not have their portfolio collected. Some of our students that are not here in the Boyertown Area School District, they are in a special education placement, did not do their portfolio requirements. And we already, I think many board meetings ago, we talked about the Smart Futures program as far as our college and career readiness platform to help support our students. Those students are having access to that now. So we went from a percentage that I'll show you shortly to we're going to be like right at almost 100% automatically if our students are actually performing in Smart Futures. So if you look at the growth data, like the secondary level, subgroups in ELA and math, again, the subgroups, there are areas that we need to improve upon, and middle school growth for all students. If you remember, interestingly enough, a celebration for our middle schools was our science scores, and that's how they performed in a particular area. But what our data was showing, based upon the Future Ready Index, is that our students, from a science perspective, were not growing as much. So they scored really well, but maybe they're not growing as much as you would predict that they might be able to do. So as I've made reference to, Boyertown Area Senior High School got designated with a label, for lack of a better term. They are targeted school improvement for the upcoming school year. And really, when you look at targeted school improvement under the new Every Student Succeeds Act, TSSI designations function as an early warning system for at-risk student groups. So we're going to show you pretty quickly what categories Boyertown Senior High did not perform as high as you might predict. And currently, right now, based upon the data that's in our comprehensive plan, Boyertown Senior High, as well as other, the Office of Teaching and Learning, Student Services, are all working collaboratively to create a targeted school improvement plan for the 4 categories that you're going to see shortly. To show you the specific data from our high school, this is, if you're, I'm into looking at data and looking at percentages, but we were charged with our subgroup of students with disabilities not meeting some of our not meeting some of our state expectations. So what I have up posted here for you are the 4 categories that the state is suggesting that the Boyertown Senior High needs to improve upon. So the 4 categories are achievement in math and ELA combined, growth, like I shared with you before, how our kids grow over time. The 3rd one is regular attendance, and the 4th one is the career standards benchmark. So,
what's the abbreviation ELA stand for?
English Language Arts.
Okay.
Yep, so it's basically your literature, English piece of it. Yeah, great question. So the first column is your students with disabilities. So if you look at our students and how they scored, 45.23% were the advanced and proficient with respect to special education. The statewide cut score was 48.4%, and when we calculated the difference, it was 3.17% of the difference between where the state was suggesting that we score compared to how our students scored. The second column is our growth scores, and this was not as easy to calculate as far as what the statewide cut scores. In fact, to be honest with you, I could not find the statewide cut score component, but what they stated was that we were negative 0.63, and that's a percentage point down, so again, it's less than 2 digits, so it's very close to what the statewide cut would be. Interestingly enough, regular attendance our students with disabilities. Now, this is students who I believe missed 10% or more of their days. If you exceeded that. So if you think of 180 school days, you're talking 18 school days during the course of a year. Our students with disabilities were 84.25% of our students did not. They were here less than 10% or here greater than 10% of that actual time. The statewide cut was 85.1. I believe, because it came up in one of our advisory committees, the Boyertown Senior High overall average was almost 90%. So if you have a perspective of all students at the Boyertown Senior High. But the difference in what the state was asking us compared to what our students were attending, it was less than 1% of the difference. And finally, like I stated before, the Career Standards Benchmark is really a collection of assignments and data points that our students completed specific criteria towards the Career Standards Benchmark. We did not, because of what had taken place last year with this as an expectation, with our BCTC students and with our students that were in out-of-district placements, they did not complete some of these assignments. So our difference was very low. We were at 71% basically of students with disabilities that met that requirement, and the statewide cut score was 87.3 for a difference of 16.33%. But again, we now have a platform, we have specific criteria in place, so I'm predicting this will be in the mid to high 90s for this year just by putting our Smart Futures plan in place. As we talked about the opportunities for growth with TSI for our senior high, I also wanted to have some data celebration. So if you look, and you remember from the video, there's 3 color coding coordinates with respect to the Future Ready Index. I'll give it in a nutshell. Blue is really good, above where you're expected to perform. Green is where you're expected to perform. And red is if you're performing below where you are predicted to perform. So the top of this, these 2 little charts here, it's blue. And this is exciting for our senior high because based upon our keystones on the left-hand side is English, language, arts, and literature. So we had 82% of our students at the senior high were proficient or advanced on our PSSAs. The statewide average was 62.1%. So our senior high basically scored almost 20% higher than the rest of the state average. And really from the Future Ready Index, if you see that statewide 2030 goal, for those of you that were a part of education back in the day with No Child Left Behind, they had put predictions out there for our students by the year, I forget what the exact year was, but every student, 100% of our students would be proficient or advanced at that particular time. It was a very zealous goal and provided a lot of controversial conversations, but I can tell you from my background and where I am today that what I appreciated about that, it was one of the first times that we had conversations between regular education, special education, everyone was concerned about all students. So even though we were, President Bush had put out 100% expectation. The reality of it was that was probably very unrealistic that we would get to 100%, but it caused conversations. And I tell you that because the state now has made specific criteria projecting 10 years out about where our students are expected to be. So you can kind of see how you are on that trend towards moving towards that year target goal. So in the year 2030, students are expected to be at 81.1%. And based upon our data point from last year, our senior high has already exceeded the 2030 benchmark goal, which is exciting. In mathematics, equally as exciting, the percentage of students that were proficient or advanced on our mathematical keystone was 83.7%. The statewide average, if you look at that, it's pretty a little bit alarming, I should say, that the statewide average was less than 50% at 45.2. So this is almost 40 percentage points above where the statewide average was last year. And if you look at the statewide goal for 2030, we're almost, by quick calculations, almost 12 percentage points higher than where we're expected to be in 2030. So as we are celebrating our hard work with some of our TSI designation with our senior high and some of the work that we're going to be working on, there's an ebb and flow of our students. So we're trying to make sure we're meeting the needs of all of our students with respect to these data points. So out of our comprehensive plan, with the 123 pages, what we wanted to do is really talk to you about our action plan goals. I'm going to pop out of here quickly and go back to our profile of a graduate page. On the bottom of our profile of a graduate page are this is the first time, this is in my 11th year within the Boyertown Area School District, and over the 11 years that I've been here, we've had different action planning tools. We've had an action plan every year. I'm excited to say that this is the first time that I feel our action plans are truly, truly driving a lot of our instructional decisions for our district. And another really exciting component is we're posting them on the website. So as we look at that profile of a graduate, you can click on these action plans and see what our buildings are working on. So I'm going to click on BASH. It links you to, again, our vision, mission, goal work. And then it goes into the background to that work. And then on the bottom of each tab, you can click on 3 different action plan goals. And Dr. O'Barrow is going to do a quick reminder shortly of the school board and the action planning template that I shouldn't say all of you because this was back in our work in November, but a reminder of the action planning that we did back in November, which I was very excited about. And as I looked over that information over the past couple of days, I'm excited to say that I feel like the school board, even with its transition, is working towards some of those goals. And I'm going to show you your action planning template as a reminder shortly, because we had a January 31st data point deadline to put into the school board action plan to talk about how we're moving towards those specific goals. But here's senior high, BASH, and their climate and culture action plan. And you can wheel down and you can see the specific things that they're working on. We have our trimester and quarter dates are a little bit different between some of our buildings. So I have tasked and I put this in the weekly update last week, I've tasked our buildings and administration, because our cabinet level team goes out and meets with each one of our building level administrators and talks through the dynamics of their action plan. And I've tasked them because right now they're kind of in the midst of collecting trimester data points. So by the end of February, we'll have their new data point information within the website. So I show you that because back to my presentation, through the action planning template and our comprehensive plan, we have created 4 goals. And I'm going to go through the goals quickly, and then I'm going to have Dr. O'Barrow kind of highlight some of our work behind them. Each one of our 4 goals that you'll see up here on the presentation was carefully crafted to help support moving all of our students forward. At our leadership Martin Luther King Day, we had some awesome opportunities to learn and help with the right sizing process and help with the impact of transition, helping to support our students from a social emotional perspective. Really good dialogue between our leadership team, really continuing to craft what the transition for our right sizing project is going to look like. Included with that was really, how is all of this helping, or how is all of this impacting what we're going to be doing over the next few years instructionally? So from our district perspective, the 4 goals that we decided to really focus on within our comprehensive planning process is, our first goal is to increase the percentage of students meeting or exceeding 1 year of growth in ELA, math, and science. Basically, we want to have our kids score really well on those assessments and really look at how are they doing with respect to those specific assessments that the state is asking us to do. But not only the state assessments that the state is asking us to do, but also our in-house and our formative assessments that we do within our own school to help support driving our instruction for our students. The second goal that we had from our action plan perspective is to really establish a district system that fully ensures consistent implementation of standards-aligned curricula across all schools for all students. I'm going to give you a very basic example. If I'm taking Algebra 1 in middle school, and let's just say the plan of my path is that I happen to take Algebra 1 in 9th grade, Algebra 1 in 9th grade should be the same Algebra 1 in 8th grade, or for students that are accelerated in 7th grade. Not that the instructional practices that the teachers craft and how they, have their expertise in a particular area, because each teacher teaches in a different, unique way based upon their strengths, but what they are expected to teach from point A to point Z should be very similar. So this is one of our goals, to have a standards aligned curricula across all our schools for all students. As I just spoke about teacher craft, our third goal leads towards a district system that fully ensures that consistent implementation of effective instructional practices across all classrooms in each school. So making sure that our teachers and instructors are using the most effective instructional practices to help support our students. And finally, a theme you've heard throughout this whole presentation is really looking at meeting the statewide requirements associated with career and college readiness. Making sure that it's not just about our students while they're here with us today, it's about helping to plan for the future of where we want our students to go. So if you think about the profile of a graduate, we think of our kiddos coming in at the kindergarten level, and within 13 years, they're leaving us, and some students to the age of 21 are leaving us, and really thinking about how are we supporting our students so that they can be as successful as possible. So I don't know, Dr. Go ahead, Mr. Brophy. Go ahead.
Goal number 2, where you're getting a system where you're bringing everything together, where like Algebra 1 is the same in all places. I understand that for the curricula. That's great. That's great. Do you ever do calibration sessions with the teachers to bring them all together for a day? Because you're right, each teachers teach to their strengths. So do you bring that together to make sure that that's going to align with what the curriculum is and everybody's going to be on the same page, at least within reason?
Absolutely. And it's funny you say that, because tomorrow is an early dismissal day. So when you see these early dismissal days on the calendar, I am charged with meeting with, this is going to be one of the first times I have the opportunity, as well as some of the Office of Teaching and Learning, to meet with high school teachers who are going to be teaching Algebra 1 for next year, and meeting with teachers from the middle level that they're going to be talking about what resources, what kinds of components do they have in place that are going to help the senior high because really, if you look at some of the examples of some of the senior high opportunities for growth, how can we give the senior high teachers access to resources for people who are successful in teaching Algebra 1. So we're bringing them together tomorrow for that conversation. And that is ongoing dialogue in many different subject matters. So your question is a great question when you even think about what do we do on early dismissal days and why do we have these days built into the calendar? Because we really truly try to maximize that time to bring our worlds together to be as consistent as we possibly can. And I'm going to be totally transparent. There's a lot of work to do. It's not an easy task, because every time you think you've gotten to a point of like, wow, this is great, there's always something like, now the senior high, because they have, a certain group of students and multiple groups of students that are getting Algebra 1, how are we supporting them in that process? So it's exciting, but yet, it's pretty daunting as far as what we do.
Yeah, it's pretty much why I asked that question. Thank you. Thanks for the roundup on that.
Mr. Stout, but I think that the other thing you want to mention is the work that was done last year when Jen Joyce brought together a number of representation of the math teachers, but then also part of the restructuring of the teaching and learning department was because of gaps that we were seeing in our instructional supervision and also professional learning. In essence, you kind of had Department of One, and then the forgot the old term before we went to the content supervisors.
Lead teachers.
Lead teachers, so they could do PD, but they had no instructional authority. So we kind of tried to address that also.
To Dr. Ben's point, really, again, this was, I think, maybe January of last year. This is a couple quick slides I'll just put up because I think it is very relevant to help answer your question. We really tried to bridge the gap between elementary school and high school, and that middle school, not that things weren't effective in middle school, but how are we getting students from elementary school to high school in the most efficient way? Again, closing our bridge. So what we decided to do was realign some of our positions, and by the way, save money in the process, using our resources more efficiently. originally, we were able to create a curriculum supervisor K through 8, a curriculum supervisor K through 12, and then have 2 related arts and wellness coordinators, or 1 in each of those positions. But having that bridge closed by those particular individuals overseeing those departments really allows us those opportunities for those conversations. So to Dr. Ben's point last year, one of the first things we were charged with was really looking at math, because last year our math scores were a little more depressed. And how are we having goal really 2 and 3, how are we putting curricula that's aligned in place and then also instructional practices in place? And we pulled the whole math department together at the middle level to really start those conversations. So.
Okay. Thank you very much, good explanation.
I had a question about goals number 1 and 3, and I know one of the difficult things in public education in general is how to measure success and how to quantify that, and that's where we end up having things like standardized testing. As flawed as they may be, it's the only form of accountability and how we quantify how things are progressing. So, but when I see, we want to increase our scores, well, of course we do, but one of the criticisms is always, are we teaching to the test? And then with goal number 3, we're looking to fully ensure consistent implementation and effective instructional practices. So how do we do those in a way that is allowing the educators to implement things and teach our students that, because I'm sure that we are doing that we're not teaching to the test, but can you just describe that for our benefit?
Okay, so I appreciate your analysis of teaching to the test. Not that that's Mr. Foos's analysis, but hearing that as a term. I have learned this over the years. This is my 22nd year in education, and I would argue the teaching to the test, that's easy to really put out there, but really the state asks us from the specific standards, the Common Core standards. This isn't a conversation whether you agree or disagree with Common Core, but the state has given us the criteria for what we should be teaching our students. That's what the state is saying Boyertown Area School District should be teaching our students. In kindergarten, they should be receiving this, in first grade, and so on. And again, it goes back to our profile of a graduate, what our expectations are. So if the state is asking us to do those specific educational data points along the way, and they're asking us to take assessments that show whether or not we're successful in those data points, you can't deny the fact that those are specific goals and strategies that need to be put in place for our students. You can deviate from that based upon instructional practice, but yet the core of what the minimal requirement for our students and what they're expected to know is outlined by the state. And by the way, from grades 3 on up, they put the assessments in place for data point collection to see how we're doing. Now, do I agree with those state assessments and not being able to level the playing field and some pieces of that? There are definitely controversial topics that go along with that. But from a teaching to the test perspective, if the state is asking us and mandating that we are teaching these specific standards, we have to teach those standards. So with Vanna Obero over here, I think it's going to help to fulfill your second part of your question. Part of our MLK Day, when we have a workshop with our administrative team, what we tasked our groups of principals, and we, believe it or not, we took a little twist on things. We pulled everybody together based upon their personalities. So we analyzed our gold personalities and our green personalities and our orange personalities. And blue. Dr. Obero and one other person was a blue personality in our district. But we randomly selected, heterogeneously grouped our administrators to really look at the 3 goals, to your question, and we had them develop strategies and talk about specific things that we either have in place or things that we want to have in place to help align with where these goals are going to go. So I'll let Dr. Obero kind of just give an overview of each one based upon our leadership team data points. And funny enough, it was gold, orange, green, and blue. So you can see the data points from our leadership team based upon their personality style. And the stars next to each of the areas was not repeating the same the same data point. So we had them cycle around each of the 4 posters based upon their personality style. But if they saw, like, for instance, on the first one, if their monitor progress, the blue personality agreed with monitor progress, so they put a star right next to that one. So that's why you see stars on the page, because a lot of it is repetitive. So Dr. Barrow.
Okay, so the first goal was to increase the percentage of students meeting or exceeding the 1 year of growth in ELA, math, and science. So just a couple things that stand out here that our team kind of reiterated with the multiple stars is we need to first begin to meet students where they are. That begins with knowing where are our students. So that's an initial assessment, the pre-assessments that we would take on our students, know where they are to help them make that 1 year worth of growth. Because as we know, our students start at multiple different levels, in multiple different grade levels. Another thing is to improve our Tier 1 instruction. Tier 1 instruction is instruction that everyone receives, targeted toward their standards. But knowing that we are going to have to differentiate, that's another piece here, to meet the needs of our students. So we can really focus on students' interests, their strengths, and target that growth toward that.
You can't pick you up on the back.
Yeah, can you just leave a mic on so she's like we can talk to
there
her?
Will it reach?
Yeah.
Just there? Should I stand from here? Stand here? Okay.
Yeah, it needs to be
I'll stand here.
Long.
I should have a laser pointer. Okay, so the second goal is to establish a district-wide system that ensures the consistent implementation of a standards-aligned curricula for all schools and all students. So a couple of things that stood out here was to really make sure that we were focusing on our at-risk and our underperforming groups. When we think about the high school and the TSI designation, we want to make sure that we start with our youngest kids in elementary school, and are we really serving those populations well at those levels, and making sure that we are supporting our at-risk students, hopefully to keep those gaps smaller. We talked about vertical alignment, and vertical alignment is just what Mr. Stout said. It's making sure if Algebra 1 is taught in the middle school, it's the same Algebra 1 that's taught in the high school, but then also, what does Algebra 2 look like? And does it pick up where Algebra 1 left off? And then where does geometry come into play? I mean, that's kind of like, is there that sequence vertically that we're not missing gaps for our students? And directly tied to assessments, and do we have common assessments? So if Mr. Stout teaches social studies in 9th grade, and I teach social studies in 9th grade, and we're using the same standards, our assessment should be the same. So we're measuring that the same. Our instructional design might be a little different. We might have a little different personality, the way that we bring that to our classroom, but ultimately our students should leave having mastered that same content. When we look at goal number 3, establish a district system that fully ensures the consistent implementation of the effective instructional practices. We really want to talk about being student-centered, comes back to here. That meeting 1 year worth of growth. Do we know where our students are and how we're going to move them? And we need to make sure that we embed that professional learning throughout for our teachers. We use our instructional coaches, our reading specialists, a lot of our support to support that professional learning and really learning from one another. Because if I'm struggling with, a certain concept or lesson in my class, I can go to my neighboring partner and say, how did your kids receive this? How did you teach this? How might I enhance this lesson? We have revive our PLCs, and a PLC is really a professional learning community. A few years back, probably, I don't know, maybe eight years ago or so, we had a big emphasis around professional learning communities, and we really want to revisit that because it is that time set aside, that collaboration time, common collaboration time, in our schedules, so we can have those lesson study discussions. We can talk about those common assessments. We can learn from one another. And that ties into the next one, which is really building and empowering teacher leadership. So taking learning walks throughout our buildings so we can go and visit our other classroom teachers, because sometimes that's where the greatest professional learning takes place, is to learn from the other people who are working in your buildings. The other piece that stands out to me there is strengthen social emotional learning. So when we can support our teachers' understanding of social emotional learning and our students' self-awareness, self-management, all of those components of social emotional learning, we know ultimately that's going to help grow our students academically as well. And the last goal is goal 4, meeting the statewide requirements associated with career and college readiness. Smart Futures is really our biggest facet in this level, because it's a cohesive system and structure that we have in place. We've identified lessons that begin in 2nd grade and go all the way up through 12th grade, actually 11th grade. For our students, 12th grade is really they do their final project and presentation in October. So they have to pretty much finish the work through 11th grade. We applied for and we were granted the Teachers in the Workplace grant. That's the TIW one there, started next. And we're working, Mr. Wells, our secondary curriculum supervisor, and myself and the high school are working together to help our teachers understand what do kiddos need when they leave the high school to be successful. And we're putting some more we're building the internship opportunities for our students, but we're also building the visits to local jobs. Right now in 10th grade, 10th grade, they go out and they visit a local business. My daughter's in 10th grade this year. She got to go to Palmer Chocolate, and she was so excited. Came home with a giant bag of chocolate. Fit her personality beautifully. But she didn't get to go to Cartech, or she didn't get to go to some of the other places that, it's pretty much by homeroom. They get assigned to which business they get to go to. But we're going to put some things in place where students can show, if you have an interest in a STEM career, if you have an interest in, we're looking at some of the hospitals and seeing if we can get kiddos in the hospitals, because the hospitals have a wide range of jobs and positions, not just for medical doctors. We think about the billing people, and we think about the registration people, and we think about receptionists and all the needs that they have at the hospital. So how can we get more kids exposed to different opportunities in the workplace? So we're targeting the grant with that. Let's see. And again with that, we are expanding those opportunities for our students with IEPs and making sure that we really look carefully at not only our IEP students, but our English language learners, our students who would qualify for free and reduced lunch, to make sure that we're supporting those groups that may not have those chances if we're not putting them in place for them. So, and the top one there is a really key one, to keep in contact with our alternative ed providers and BCTC, really keep those lines of communication open, because to really support kids no matter where they are in our school district. Good?
Thank you, Dr. Barrow.
Of course.
Some of you that know my background is really in special education. I came to Boyertown Area School District for after 13 years in being a different school district, but 6 of those years was as a special education supervisor. And what I find ironic in this new college or career and college readiness platform is in spending an inordinate amount of time over my years working through IEP process and writing goals and really focusing on transition planning for students with individualized education plans. This transition plan that we were required to do for years for our students with special needs has completely done a 180, and now the state, over the course of the past 3 to 5 years, is requiring it of all students, which is an absolute celebration to help plan for the future of our students. Not every student is going to be college ready. There are plenty of careers and opportunities for our students that we provide for our students to plan for. HVAC, plumbing, horticulture, all kinds of careers that every one of us in this room has reached out to help support us in some capacity. But if we don't plan to have the needs of that area of the world met, we're going to have areas where we are all paying a lot of money to have our HVAC system, fixed in our homes, or when you're stuck with the situation when you have landscaping to do. It's a cycle of events, and I celebrate the fact that our fourth goal is an area that we are really working towards, and Dr. O'Bara can probably attest to this. 50% of our professional learning over the course of the past year has been focused on this within the district, at least 50%, because it's such a hot and important topic for our students. So bringing it all together and looking at how does this all come together for our students, and I would like to modify this slide to have on the left-hand side a little kiddo coming to kindergarten, because really if we think about our profile of a graduate, envision a little kiddo. Well, maybe there is a little kiddo there, you just can't see him. He's kind of beneath. He's probably hiding under a table because it's the first day of kindergarten. But how do we plan and support our students as they continue through our Boyertown continuum of supports? The comprehensive planning we've talked about tonight, our vision, mission, goals was work that we had done prior to this school year starting. A lot of hard work and efforts to create our dashboard, and also our future ready and our PA standards to really think about how we are supporting our students. So that's how we're bringing it all together. The goal is by fall of next year, we will really start honing in on this profile of a graduate. So maybe by the time we're meeting a year from now, because there's a lot of elements to this, that we will have a continuum and have some specific elements along the way, because this is not just Dr. Bedden, myself, Dr. O'Barrow coming and trying to develop this. It's really bringing many stakeholders' voices in this process to really think about what are the expectations for our students as they cycle through Boyertown. So, Mrs. Hogan, that is all I have tonight.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that presentation. Next is committee comment.
Any questions before?
Oh,
I had a question on things like social and emotional learning, and even when we talk about career and college readiness, how do things like social and emotional learning factor into that, as well as some of the soft skills and just interpersonal relationships and things of that nature that may not show up on a test? How are those incorporated into any of this? And if they're not incorporated into this, how are we measuring our success at that?
Another great but loaded question with respect to what we're doing as a district, and I'm glad you did ask the question. And one of the things Dr. Obero and I had an opportunity last year to go to a SAS Institute in December, and one thing that resonates with me, and oftentimes people term those skills soft skills, but one of the speakers there who really was kind of renowned in helping to support our students said, you know what, soft skills just doesn't have enough impact. These are really impact skills, because these skills are the skills that really can make or break. You can be somebody who's really smart in books, you can be somebody who really scores on assessments, but if you don't have these impact skills, which you're making reference to, which a lot of people call soft skills, how are you able to support the success of our students? So our district for this past year and for the next couple years have really undertaken the SEL focus. If you remember to the previous board who approved the day on election day when we made an early dismissal day and pulled all of our staff into our high school auditorium, we focused on trauma-informed information for our students. We brought all of our paraprofessionals, we brought all of our teachers into one room. It was a very powerful moment to have everyone in our district that is working on a daily basis with our students to really talk about trauma-informed. And I won't go into the Castle 5, but the Castle 5 is a big piece of self-awareness and the pieces that go along with that. But we are having our adults be educated on the impact on social emotional learning for this year. It sounds a little silly that we're focusing on our adults the first year, but really we have to educate our adults to the power of the impact of the social emotional learning with the transition of those same skills for our students for the upcoming school year. Now there's a lot of things happening that our adults are working in social emotional learning with our students, but the focus is really having the adults take care of themselves, having the adults understand the impact of social emotional learning. And what has transpired over this is we have over 100 SEL champions within our district, and Dr. Obero meets with them. In fact, she just met with them today, I believe, in a committee to really bring back that learning. And there's a book called Onward that they are utilizing for their supports, but how are they bringing back the social emotional components to their staff to help build that capacity to help support our kids? Because if your social emotional needs aren't being met, you're not going to be successful in what you're doing. So we're really trying to find that happy medium to that, and really trying to understand that there are a lot of issues our students bring to us on a daily basis, and an understanding of what constitutes some of our students and what makes them tick is a key component to what we're focusing on this year. So it's a big thrust with our district. We've celebrated because Dr. Obero and I have the ability to go out and communicate with Berks County curriculum coordinators, and we're super excited about what we're doing, because I feel like we're a step ahead of trying to meet that SEL component, and really the overflow and how that keeps moving forward is going to have such a huge impact on our students. So hopefully that answered your question a little bit.
We should probably send you all the Castle model, because at the end of the day, you can't talk about SEL and not make a connection to college or career readiness, because it's about attitudes, behaviors, and I think the third one is skills, actually. But to Mr. Stout's comment about when they say that we talk about soft skills is not enough. The wheel talks about the whole thing being about self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. Well, to I think someone's earlier point about our profile of a graduate, most districts, whereas we want to go to is a conversation about it's more than just you being able to do 2 + 2. And really, the state tells us certain things, but districts that have done a profile of a graduate have said we want our kids to be more than just reading, writing, and math. When we talk about, so one thing that comes up is being a good citizen or caring about your community. Well, that's all of those things. And then when you talk about the ways in which that happens, approaches, when they talk about SEL approaches, it's the skills that are a part of how you integrate them into instruction. And I think Dr. Barrow, for example, uses the type of literature you choose to use. So we're not stop teaching them reading, but it's the type of literature we choose to give them that can both help with their SEL work, but also still working on reading. The instructional practices of the teacher, how do they interact with the student and understand how to, for example, culture and climate within the classroom, and how do we de-escalate things. Self-awareness and social skills are important, because one of the challenges that we keep talking about is my overly simplified version is we've gotten so much into the technical aspect in our schools, our kids don't know how to play in the sandbox anymore. I mean, literally, that's why recess is a big deal. It's important to me, and those other things that we've run out of time to do. And they will always say in Castle, it's not supposed to be a separate thing. It's about embedding it into what you do every day. So it's in the core curricular aspect, but it's also then some very instructional practices that are unique, like the Pathways a program that can be incorporated as part of one of your electives areas for our students, which gets to the character of the person and ethical, moral behaviors, all those types of things that we want to produce with decision making, which if we get it right early on, some of even the decisions in high school, like dealing with the vaping, decision making, stealing, conflict resolution becomes easier.
So as Dr. Bedden, real quick, just if you look on the screen, I just pulled up the Castle 5, and really the foundation of our SEL work this year is really looking at those 5 competencies: self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. And the conversations and the work that we're doing for our adults, which is going to move towards supporting our students on a daily basis, these are the 5 areas of focus. So you can see when you hear Castle 5, this is the Castle 5. Yes.
So, so I guess what I'm hearing is the social emotional learning. You pretty much started with the staff to train them in exactly what social emotional learning is, because I'm assuming that based on some of the professional learning I've gone to through PSBA over the years, social emotional learning was something that they had to educate the staff about, because there were staff that didn't understand what trauma-informed experiences were for kids and all that. So am I understanding that first you're kind of starting with educating our staff on what is encompassed in SEL? Is that, and then you're going to move on to trying to have that awareness? So, like, I guess I'm trying to think of a specific. What would be a specific example of our educator implementing social emotional learning as in our school, like something more specific? Can you? Is there?
Yeah. Oh. So it started with our leadership team last summer, and there's various strands of social emotional learning that were happening within our district. So this isn't just a new process, but many of our teachers incorporate mindfulness, mindset, different capacities that are in place to help support our students. But what the SEL team chose to do for this particular year is to focus on the adult and really focus on these competencies and really talk about strategies that can help to support people finding their safe place, their ability to handle situations in a calm way. So the Onward book is a focus, and there are strategies and different delivery techniques that happen with respect to that, building trust, building relationships, communicating effectively, different pieces that put people in a safe place. So those instructional practices are happening in faculty meetings. They're happening with our SEL champions. They're happening when we had our early dismissal last Wednesday. The staff had 10 different workshops that they could choose to attend that helped to support SEL learning based upon the Castle 5. So we have 500 plus teachers in the district, 10 workshops. Each of the workshops was attended by about 50 different teachers. This same delivery model was done back in November when people could choose another workshop. So you got to eventually pick 2 of the 10 workshops to attend. And the hope with that is to get a true dynamic understanding of what social emotional learning is, like you made reference to, and the core of what that that social emotional component is based upon these Castle 5 techniques. So a lot of it is based upon the parameters of what's presented here to build that core foundation, because if our teachers don't know and understand what social emotional learning is, they can't help to support their students. And as they're learning about what the core of social emotional learning is, it's helping them to be better understanding of not only themselves, but how that works to help support their students.
So I would give you a tangible example because we mentioned it. One, the state mandated the trauma training. So for the first time, we brought everybody. When the board granted us, we modified that professional learning day, and everybody came together. They were sitting alongside, whether you were a cafeteria worker, whether you were office staff or a teacher, and together. And it was focused on trauma, and I got a lot of people saying it was so eye-opening. So where I would tell you that trauma-informed schools fit is social awareness right off the bat. It's easy to make the connection when you talk about perspective taking, empathy, appreciating diversity and perspective of others. I mean, there's a direct connection. There's an awareness of what does that look like, and that could be impacting a student in the school, where sometimes we may think it's just a behavior issue when it's actually a behavior that's associated with some type of trauma that's happened in a student's life. And discipline response is not going to help that. They may need, counseling, referral to mental health to address it. So that's a connection there. So, so that's kind of it. But I think the overall arching theme for us is when we stepped back and we started to go down this path, when the staff came back and said, if we roll this out, because we were looking at instruction with our students, even we looked at some opportunities at our elementary level where we felt like we could restructure today. But if they don't understand it, how are they going to work on our students? And so it's evolved into not only understanding and awareness and the model and what it means, it's also become a reflective piece for many of them about themselves. And how does this impact them? Because I get a number of comments that I really didn't think about, even the trauma presentation. Several of them said they identified with as it relates to them, not just thinking about their students in the classroom.
We had there were numerous reflective opportunities during the course of this presentation, and one actually brought me to tears. We had a custodian in our district actually stand up in front of 600-700 people and reflect on a past experience, and it wasn't necessarily a bad experience, but he was so moved by the presentation that he spoke in front of all the people and really gave an anecdote on his life that he, and in a spin, it was actually a positive experience, but it was the way someone in his his childhood helped to guide him, and but they wish they would have provided him with another opportunity. It was just an interesting thing, but that was the power of that presentation to really make an impact on our adults.
And that and I think that is honestly something that has been lacking in our district. I think that we have been so focused on academics and scores and let's be in the top 100 and let's be in the, we really have ignored that. And I think that the profile of a graduate, they had a learning module on that. 2 years ago that I went to, and it was really interesting because they started out with the basics of a profile of a graduate, career readiness and all that, and then their board actually said, well, we now want to expand upon this. And they said that they were actually putting into their profile that they were putting the word empathy in there, because they felt after they kept refining this that their students were not empathetic. They were so focused on doing, A, B, C, and D to either go to the military, get a career, or go to college, that they really felt that was lacking. So they were actually putting that in their, I don't know whether it was a comprehensive plan or just their statement of a profile of a graduate. And it was pretty eye-opening. It was interesting to me that that schools were actually going beyond that as well. So I think, and it probably all ties into the SEL thing as well.
One quick point, and then Mr. Brophy. So one of the pieces, and I won't go into it now, and you can pull it up, but it's the ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences. There are ACEs scores, and there's a survey of data points that you can take, as an adult, and it truly is amazing when you look at the level of need from a quantitative way, which really social emotional learning, let a lot of people think it's very qualitative and it's fluff and different things like that. But when you look at it in a quantitative way, and to see a student that has an ACEs score that is 4 or 5, it's amazing the impact and the level of diverse experiences that this particular child might have to be successful. It is very powerful information, so I suggest in your spare moments, look it up and look at some of the experiences that go along with that, because it is a very impacting, quantifiable way to look at what impacts some of these experiences that our kiddos come to us today. And us as adults, you don't really think about, wow, that really did have a traumatic experience, and I'm just making a statement, chemical abuse in your families, or where there was abuse, or different scenarios. It's just amazing how much of an impact that can have on our students.
Okay, 2 questions. One, do you plan on having refreshers on this every so often, this trauma training? It's 1. And 2, how are you going to address new people coming into your employment with this training? Are you going to give it to them as part of their orientation, or do you expect them to pick it up as a refresher course as you move forward?
Again, great questions. Our commitment to, we have an outside entity, Tom Stecker and his associates, coming in to help us for the next 2 to 3 years for that process. So how we facilitate that is going to be an evolving process for the next few years. But certainly we want to make sure, as we have new employees coming in, we want to give those opportunities. We did video our presentation that happened in November. Mary Beth's Mrs. Torsh's office is she's termed the safety queen, which you may not have heard yet, but you'll hear that more and more. But part of that process is really to be looking at some of these elements in collaboration with the Office of Teaching and Learning. So as those requirements come down from the state, and how we warehouse that training piece is going to be something that's going to be an evolution, because it literally is hot off the press just this year that it was a requirement.
Yeah, that's why I bring it up, because these things continually change and evolve. So if you give it a one-time, I'm giving it to you now, they may find 2 or 3 years from this point that, well, maybe this was not completely correct, and we need to address it this way. And also, new people coming in, it would be unfair to them not to be getting the same type of training. Again,
you were not on the board, back in the fall, but when we added that half day, I think Mrs. Torsha came back from a training that said it had to happen, yesterday, and that was where the state came down with this specific training, and people are reeling, because there's so many requirements back to the standard aligned curriculum and so many expectations. I feel we were truly blessed to already. We maybe looked into our crystal ball and already had looked to SEL as a focus for our district. So it was very easy for us to embed it based upon a little schedule tweak for our district this year. But as we move forward and the expectations change, we're just going to have to see what that looks like.
Yeah, I just want to make sure you don't lose this impetus. You've got a good plan. You've got it going forward. You got a good concept of it. Don't die.
Okay, Dr. Bedden has a comment, then Mrs. McWhirter.
I was just going to connect some dots. If you remember, at last board meeting, we talked about repackaging. So we are actually, just like we restructured Mr. Stout's department, we've tried to look at also repackaging the resources that we have. To your point, to not lose emphasis on this, but also not make it look like it's something that's separate of what we do. And one of the things that was also interesting is teachers are realizing they're actually doing some things already, but they didn't know this was it. So that was the other thing, that you're actually doing a lot of this, you just don't realize that you're doing it. And we want you to recognize it and continue it and grow it, share it with others. But the school nurse situation is a part of social emotional learning. The work that we talked about with our counselors is a part of social emotional learning. Rafe and what he does when he goes into the classrooms and teach, beyond when he's intervening on a law or a violation issue, are a part of that work. And so what you will see again brought forward, as I alluded to, is some cost neutral repurposing of people and how they do work within the district, and then some tweaking of positions, because we had talked about the issue with our council ratio. We know the association talks about it should be really 250 to 1. Well, we can't get there, but we had talked about a targeted goal of 350 to 1. But some of the principals have been talking about, but we need help with this because I'm tied up doing administrative work. So you'll see some work done where reallocation of staff that the department has done, brought forward to actually give those big elementary schools some help in this area, so that it's not only someone who is helping to deal with this in a school culture and climate, but also when the principal is absent, you have free hands, so the counselor's not pulled away from the work they're doing, which is also another issue that is happening in a lot of our elementary schools. They end up getting tied up with administrative work, and they're not working with our students because they're really the only person that's not sitting in front of the students teaching a class quite often. So it is a big overhaul and a shift in thinking that we're having to do. And at the end of the day, as always, it can't always be new money. We have to repurpose and restructure some of the things. So a little bit of new money, but we also got to redirect the resources we have.
So I have two comments that I'm thinking about. One is when we went to our PBSA training and we had the trauma section, one of the things that they mentioned, and I talked about this with Dr. Bedden and with Mr. Foose, was the movie Paper Tigers. And I know that Mrs. Hogan had watched it, and I would recommend it just because I think it's a good baseline of what social emotional learning, trauma training from the teacher's perspective and a student's perspective. I thought it was good, very good. And I just wanted to comment that, I know that we have a couple of kids in the district that are cancer students, and I think about the social emotional learning that are going on, in the elementary schools with the ACEs that some of those kids are having in the classroom. And those teachers are getting hands-on training, and kudos to them. Oh, and also kudos to our school counselors. Dr. Bedden had mentioned, and I don't know any, but thank you for all the work you do.
If you see one, it actually is School Counselor Recognition Week, so just perfect timing for the shout out.
Yes.
Okay, so I have a quick comment. Two comments. One, I think sometimes people think that SEL is just for trauma kids. It's really not. It's really about teaching self-awareness to all children, which is really important. And then two, excuse me, I apologize. So I am a trauma kid. I have an ACEs score of 6, which is significant. And I can say that this is really, really important work. So the work that is happening, I know a lot of people don't get it and they're kind of confused by it and they don't really understand how impactful this is. But oftentimes you can't see trauma. Like we can see that, our children who are struggling with learning disabilities, that can be seen, it can be measured. We can see kids who, are struggling with illnesses, that can be seen and measured. Trauma is different and it shows differently. So I think it's really great that we are training our teachers first. And then, I'm excited to see where it goes. So any other questions? So now we're going to enter board comment. Any board comments? Mr. Foose.
This is related to the presentation, but I thought it was more board comment. Just generally speaking, I really like this type of presentation. I mean, this is what I think most of us enjoy about being involved with the school district and the school board. And it's really, I don't, rewarding is the wrong word, but it feels really good to hear from people speak with such passion on the topic in general. Everything from our Future Ready Index and how we're performing as a district to things like social and emotional learning and how we're looking to better support our students and staff. It means a lot to hear this and have it be as truly genuine as it comes across. And I just wanted to say, for everybody who's played a role in any aspect of this, which I guess is basically the entire school district, thank you very much for all that you're doing, because it really does mean a lot. As a parent with 2 kids right now in the schools, you can see some of it paying off, and I really do appreciate it. And nights like this, I really enjoy being a part of the school board. Thank you.
Just really quick, as Mr. Foose made reference, Dr. Barrow, can you hand out? I just wanted to remind the school board, because I'm not sure with the transition with all of the new board members. Back in November, we did a workshop based upon the action plan. So I actually used some of my print count. So understand how valuable these documents are because I printed them out of my print count. I don't print things. I know, I don't print things. So just so you're aware of that. But this is the same action planning template that we've used throughout the district for our buildings, for our cabinet, and also from the workshop that took place, I want to say maybe back in November. But just a reminder, and I don't know how the board wants to move forward with looking at, and maybe it's a pre-board meeting at some point just to evaluate how the current school board is looking with respect to the goals that were created by some of the previous board members with some of the current board members. So there's some very obvious things here that I think we're doing a nice job with. I think by the presentation tonight and some of the data that was given to you in the weekly updates and some of the review of data, we could maybe do some checks off the boxes of what the school board had designated for goals that they'd be working on. But I wanted to give that as a reminder, since this is a very relevant topic, and trying to provide consistency across our school district, from our students to our staff, to our buildings, to our administration, to our cabinet, to the school board, and all utilizing the same metrics and the same components to establish our levels of success, as well as looking at our opportunities for growth as a group. So I almost forgot to hand this out and give it to you, but I wanted to make sure you had this just as a review point. Dr. Ben, anything to? Okay. All right, so I'm sorry, Mrs. Deroff.
So what you saved some ink because it's cut off and everybody, so
yeah,
you should be able to get a page or 2 extra.
I wasn't going to print it again because then I'd lose 30 more copies off my print count.
I think, and it's just one of the peeves I have, on your education community, on the committee, you have planning committee, I was kind of dismayed to see that there's no board member on there at all. Just my own feeling.
And I wholeheartedly agree with you. The goal of our workshop in January was to have input from the board, and in one of the weekly updates from about 2 weeks ago, I knew we were kind of, based upon the weather, not cooperating with us. I specifically gave a timeline for, even though the comprehensive plan was a daunting document, an opportunity for input from the board to see if you had any questions, and I would have been more than willing, and I had spoke to Mrs. Hogan about the timing of it, just to see if there's any specific questions. So I do apologize for the weather events, but as we met with our parent advisory committee, our teacher-student advisory committee, teacher-staff advisory committee, our student advisory committee, and by the way, tomorrow we're meeting with our business community and going over the same information. The board was projected to be 21st. Next to the leadership team, but unfortunately, you ended up almost being last because of the weather dynamic. So I do apologize for that.
Any other comments? Okay. Announcements. Next Tuesday is the Finance, Facilities, and Operations Committee. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Second? Okay. We're adjourned. Meeting adjourned.